What are your thoughts on minimalism as a lifestyle?
Well, it can become a fetish. Somebody where somebody just doesn't have anything, and that's it can be incredible if somebody's really able to do that and maintain. But if somebody doesn't have the tools that they need to work, then it's not a good fetish. Yeah, I think that it's crazy that there's so many storage units, that people have so much stuff that they don't get defined by who they are, but by what they have, and that is crazy. That I visited my dad and his wife, and they were staging houses. So they had to furnish houses, and she runs a antique business, but the house that they're living in is just stuffed with stuff, and it makes it really confusing. So on a boat, it's a really smart thing to be as minimalist as possible, and if you're not, to know where everything is at least, and especially on a small boat.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty natural.
Kind of forces you almost to be.
Yeah. And there's something about hoarding. I mean, I have a whole bunch of pencils, and I'm just as guilty in some ways as everybody else. But it usually is people trying to fill up an empty spot inside of themselves, and it can't be done with things. So I'm pro minimalism for sure. And it's, and it damages the earth for people to always be buying stuff and all the stuff that packages the stuff. And sometimes it's to buy it for other people, but to prove that you can give them a good gift because you care about them. And it can be kind of embarrassing.
What are your thoughts about sustainability, and what efforts do you make towards it?
Well, I've been. Sometimes I'm a fanatic about it, but because I've only been back for a week, and I went for a couple weeks on Greyhound, and it's absolutely impossible, or it wasn't impossible, but it was unlikely that I could go across the country and not use all these cans and bottles and plastic stuff. So I'm still feeling the after effects from that right now. I'm a little looser about that than I have been. I think that people have to get pretty close to zeroing out the plastic, and that's from a guy that's in a plastic boat right now. Wood boats are beautiful things, and they sail better in a lot of ways than plastic boats, but they take a lot more time to keep up. So especially the plastic is just crazy. That right now our society is based on a preponderance of unsustainability. Most of it is. And that means that for the kids growing up now, it's going to be rougher on them. It's already getting that way. It already is that way. So we have got to do this individually first, and then we can do it with our families and friends, and then it'll ripple out. That's the only way, because in no way is our political system ready to deal with this now in the United States. It just is impossible. So individuals have to do it themselves, and do it then their families and friends. Yeah, right. I mean, it's not a competition. It's not a competition except to do something good. If people are competing to be the best at doing something good, that's a great thing. But if they're competing to be the best, to feel self-righteous or full of pride, then it becomes a stumbling block for everybody else. because they'll just say, I don't want to be like that. Look at that person. Yeah, they might be doing all of this sustainability, but they're a pain to be around. And so we were at Toretta's, and we were doing recycling, and I had talked about that with her a little bit, and even about doing a recycling business, because China's no longer taking a lot of American recycling. That's how there's a trade war, tariffs that started happening because of that. Because we would ship out all of our garbage. Our garbage was filled with garbage that we would sort our plastics or our aluminum cans, and instead they'd be covered with garbage, and so the Chinese could not recycle it very easily. They'd have to go through more steps to clean up all that mess, and so they just said, we've got to stop accepting all of this. They still accept a lot, and we're still shipping out from the big cities. They ship to the rural areas, and the boats, American boats, are broken up and on the coast of China or India. It's a fine line between doing the right thing and not making it into a barrier that becomes another punishment religion that nobody's going to be interested in.
Yeah. And
people are going to start hating. And that's almost, so you look now at the way the Republican Party acts, and it's not just them. It's not just the Republicans, but it's like, I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to make sure it's a big car and I'm going to drive it as much as possible, because they're irritated by people acting self-righteously. So that's it's dangerous. So to be able to do it, but just make it a part of life instead of, oh, look how special I am, look how chosen I am, look how much better I am than everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Or what are your thoughts on selflessness in relation to hosting travelers?
Well, I liked the idea that selflessness is like anything else, that it goes up and down depending on somebody's life, and it can be taught too, and it's taught by example. And so if a host, myself, is able to be that way, then the travelers are going to become more that way. If I'm becoming less that way, then they're going to become less that way, really. So yeah, it's part of sustainability, it's part of minimalism, it's part of everything. And I'm not 100% there yet or anything like that, as far as being completely selfless. Because ultimately that becomes a willingness to go to jail if somebody's being mistreated, to say, well, okay, go ahead, mistreat me. I can't stand this anymore. And even to die. And that is something that cannot be demanded of anybody, but it can be suggested. And to have a few people do that is world changing. Even for one person to do it, to really do it. And that's the story. That's where religions come from, that here's examples of people that were able to do that. And I've met people that are more like that. And it's inspirational. It's amazing. And I've met people that are less like it, and it's painful sometimes. And it's painful for me when I'm less like it, and it's better when I'm more like it, There's a subtle part of that too, which is that if somebody's trying to be selfless on another person's grid, the way that they do it, they're going to fail. They have to be selfish enough to understand themselves, to give themselves time, however long, to be alone, to be to do what other people might call crazy or weird or strange,
Right.
or even call selfish, right? It's like, well, you're the one that's being selfless. You say you're being selfless, but that's the most selfish thing you can do. Here we've set up this society, and we've enabled you to do all of these different things, and you're rejecting it. So that's the selfish part. And then to really be strong enough to understand yourself well enough to have a self that becomes a capitalized self, which is, in Hebrew, the word is anochi, which means a self that's connected with a larger self. That there's messages that we get from our best self, and then there's messages that we get from our little s self, right? And to be able to tell the difference, and sometimes we're going to be called selfish when we're most selfless. It's not always readily apparent to somebody else, but if a person is in touch with themselves, they're going to know it. They're going to know when they're acting selflessly and when they're not. So the one law of the sea, there's only one, is if somebody's drowning, you have to reach your hand down and pick them up. It doesn't mean that if it's a huge storm and they go off the side, and you might not be able to pick them up. It's just going to be impossible. And I have met people. These were a person who sold me a boat, and a person who I came to California with from Colorado. We drove together here, and I was on a boat with them, and there was somebody who was drowning. I suggested that we do something to help them, and they were not keen to do that. They didn't. Said it's not our problem, like that, and I could never look at them the same again. So that's at one level. There are people out there who will not save a drowning person, even when there's not going to be almost no risk to themselves. They just will not do it. Also, a person has to understand that if they get to the point where they're giving something and they're giving it grudgingly, they're just like, oh, I don't want to do this, but I'm supposed to do it. That's going to deplete them, and they might go completely. You probably have heard people say that. It's kind of common phrase. It's I can't be that good anymore, and we kind of heard it tonight with Doretta. Right here was a meth addict that I brought into my house. I can't do that anymore. It's not, and she's on the line between wanting to do it and feeling like she can't. And that's why I would say I'll be the one to go. I can't give up the way that I feel about feeding people, but I don't want to. If you're so drained that maybe it's making you sick. And I'm not saying that that's the case here, because I think she was, I don't think that was it, but she's a very sensitive person. And she's got to be strong. A person has to be very strong to be selfless. So sometimes they're going to have to, say, right now I've just got to go and do whatever it is that's going to recharge my batteries. I can't be throwing myself to help people because I'm just starting to hate it. And hate myself, and I'm losing everything,